Welcome to Soul Night Live number 55. Tonight we take a look back at highlights from 2020. Our musical guest tonight is Matthew Smith, and my co host is Stephen Cox. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Sean, how's it going?
It's going well. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. I'll get to wear this hat just any time,
Yeah,
Makes my head sweat.
I should grab mine. I have one somewhere. Not in the room, though, I guess.
So I hope everybody had an awesome holiday. How has your holiday season been going?
Pretty good time. Got to Zoom chat, kind of like this, with family, and then got to grab a meal with a friend. So it was pretty good.
I'm going to crack open a fresh one here.
Awesome.
We'll get it rolling here. So thank you all for dropping by the chat room tonight, and we're going to have a best of look back at some special stories from some of our guests in the past. 8 months? I guess May was the first one.
I think so.
I'll tell you a little bit about how this show kind of came to be. I have to admit, I wasn't really looking to do this. It wasn't against the idea. It just never occurred to me. I've enjoyed some other people's shows like this. Notably, a guy named Rick Beato here in Atlanta, who's a YouTube sensation, and some other people. And in a few minutes, we're going to take a look at some of our favorite YouTube channels that we think you should check out, including Rick's. And so, everybody's doing this Zoom thing in the spring because we're all stuck at home. And just for fun, I did one with Stephen, because Stephen does these quite a bit. He teaches via Zoom. So he was, quite adept at it. So we had a chat and we invited in some of our friends. I think our friend Anthony Mancini came by and he played Pink Panther for us. No, he didn't, but he could. He could. And we just chatted about guitars, and that was about it. And I called it Soul Night Live because me and Steven are half of our band, Story of a Life. So I thought, well, this is just going to be a show tonight about the band. So I'm going to name it after the band or abbreviate it. And then the next week we did another one with Craig Curley from Not Otherwise Specified, a local prog band, and our friend Daniel Graham, who is from another group called The Great Wide Nothing, who just put out a fantastic new record you should check out. What is it called? Hymns for the Dead? Hymns for... Darn it. Well, look it up. It's Hymns for Hungry Spirits. I think that's what it's called. Does that sound right? Sorry, Daniel. But anyway, look it up. It's great. So long story short,
it's an awesome record.
After a couple weeks of this, I started thinking, well, I might as well just, invite some friends. I'm got some musical friends that I'm friends with on Facebook. So my first thought was my friend Jake Livgren, who you might remember from a group called Protocol, which is a Kansas offshoot that his uncle Kerry Livgren started. And he's sung on a lot of Kerry's solo records over the years. Fantastic singer and just a super nice guy. He's a good friend. So holiday greetings to you, Jake. We'll get you on here again. We're talking about having him co-host a special show coming up. And I think we're going to do a show on the history of Kansas sometime in the first quarter of the year. So, I'll definitely get Jake in on that one and some specialists as well. So we'll see who winds up being our guest that night. So anyhow, it just started rolling from there, and I started reaching out to different friends on Facebook. So anyhow, I just decided to start, kind of going down the list. And, this was just a great chance to talk music with some friends of mine and some artists whose music I've admired for, decades. So it was kind of a dream come true. And Stephen really encouraged me. So thank you, Stephen.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's fun trying to give you little pointers on YouTube and all sorts of things. And
oh yeah, and it took me a little while to kind of get my groove together. At first you were helping me co-host, and then you got some weddings and actual gigs to go play.
Yeah,
good for you. And I kind of had to learn how to do it solo, which is good. I needed to anyway. But there's definitely a few pregnant pauses where it's like, hold on, let me share this link, let me do this or that. But I've gotten better about it. So, you know. So, hey, how y'all doing tonight? Hey, Mark. Hey, Eric. Hey, Russ. Hey, Mark. Mark number 2. You're all number 1 in my book. So I thought we would start by taking a look at who is coming up on the show in January. I try to book everything about a month in advance, and I've got some pretty cool stuff going on. You know, I'm a big fan of Frank Zappa and anything Zappa-esque related. And these next 3 shows are kind of all in that ballpark, I think. So I'm going to do a little screen sharing here, and we're going to take a peek at the different shows that I have lined up starting January 2nd. This gentleman might look familiar to you, especially if you're an Atlantan. He is the sensei of the South. You know, he is the Colonel Bruce Hampton, who played with the Hampton Grease Band, which was basically kind of like the Southern Mothers of Invention. They were very much in that same ballpark in that same time period, late 60s. I mean, they were very ahead of their time. And they, you know, we'd be talking about Bruce alone over that. But Bruce went on to be kind of like the South's Miles Davis or Frank Zappa, in the sense that he was a great assembler of talent and put together some amazing groups over the next 30 or 40 years, playing with basically the cream of the crop down here in the South. And everybody that played with him was better for it. They became a richer musician in the process. And a lot of Bruce's deal was more about just, you know, not how to play licks or anything like that. It's not about that. It was more about letting go of your ego and getting out of the way and playing without thinking about anything in particular. So Bruce is a legend down this way. And unfortunately, he passed away. It was really interesting and sad the way it went down, but kind of glorious at the same time. It was his 70th birthday. And we're at the beautiful Fox Theater downtown. And all of his friends are gathered around, you know, Derek Trucks, Warren Haynes, Jimmy Herring, just pretty much every great player you can think of. Susan Takeshi, kind of a who's who of the jam band circuit down this way. Even Peter Buck from REM was there, which was cool to see him. I always liked his arpeggiating. And so anyhow, we're having a show devoted to Bruce and his memory on the 2nd. And my good friend Jez Graham is going to drop by and be my co-host. And some of you might remember the keyboardist on our debut album, Bill Graham. Well, Jez is his father, and I've been a friend of the family for many years, and I'm excited to spend a chat with him. And we also have a biographer that's coming by that just wrote a book about Bruce. So tune in for that. That's going to be very enlightening. I'm excited to do that. So that's coming up on January 2nd. And then the following week, on the 9th, we're taking a close look at the guitar style of Frank Zappa and also his guitars and gear. My old friend Mike Keneally is going to drop by. He played with Frank in 1988. And he's also featured prominently in that new Zappa biography. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about his style and maybe have Mike show us a few examples. And then about an hour in, we're going to invite 3 of his former techs, Thomas Nordegg, Bob Rice, and Merle Saunders Jr. And I think Merle Saunders was also like Jerry Garcia's tech or something. So very interesting show in the works. I've learned that these nights where I do a theme like this are really popular sometimes. Like my History of Yes, a 6.5 hour slog through their catalog in history, turned out to be one of my most popular themed shows. It's a 2-parter. Go check it out at our YouTube page. And then the following week, another guy you might know from Atlanta, Jeff Sipe, who has played with the Colonel in the Aquarium Rescue Unit. He's played with Jimmy Herring, his bandmate from the ARU, in Jimmy's band, The Invisible Whip. I don't know if you caught their tour about a year ago with John McLaughlin and his group. doing each doing a set, and then they came out and did a whole set of Mahavishnu. And it was mind blowing. It was, who ever thought John McLaughlin would play those songs again, so that was thrilling. So Jeff will be coming by for that one. So, and I don't know if you heard the news on the street, but there's a new Yes offshoot called Arc of Life, ARC. Not like a boat, but like a arcing electricity kind of. And they're going to be dropping by sometime in January as well. And that includes Yes bass player Billy Sherwood, Yes vocalist John Davison, Yes drummer number 2, I guess. Well, he kind of works in tandem with Alan White now, Jay Schellen, and my good friend Dave Kersner on keyboards, who's been on the show before, and Jimmy Hahn, who played with Billy in a group called Circa, which was another Yes offshoot that had some success about 20 years ago, maybe now. So they got a new group together, and all of progdom is talking, because it's an interesting record. It isn't your blatant prog rock record. It's a little more melodic and a little more poppy. So we're going to talk to them and kind of see where they're coming from. So anyhow, yeah, left to right, that's Dave Kersner, Jay Schellen, Jimmy Hahn, John Davison, and Billy Sherwood. So we haven't quite nailed down a date for that one yet, but coming in January.
That's
so
awesome.
Stephen, what's the coolest gig you played this year?
The coolest gig I've played this year. Oh, that's tough. I've played a lot of weddings, so it's kind of hard to kind of compare one to the other, because they're similar yet different. I could rate the food at the weddings or something. There was one that had some really nice salmon, but that has nothing to do with music.
Okay, I mean, if it all runs together and the food makes it stand out, then that's cool.
But the gigs are actually a lot of fun. I think some of the things that make the weddings fun is you end up with some really weird requests. Like they seem to have a lot of requests for things like Baby Got Back, a lot of like Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears and Spice Girls and stuff. So it's interesting. It's music I never thought I'd play, but it's kind of fun now, because it reminds me of the music I didn't really get into as a child or whatever. Now I realize there's actually some aspects of some of it you can really appreciate, because producers and talented musicians came up with the backing for those songs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think something I've realized in the last 5 years is I love performing more than anything. I love to record and write, but that's a distant second to just getting on stage and playing with a great band. And it often doesn't matter what song it is. Being part of the Badass All-Star Collective the past 4 years, I've played everything.
Yeah.
They weren't all songs that I knew or wanted to know, but I was better for learning them. And every time you take a song apart, suddenly it kind of reveals its charms to you. It's like, oh, that's a really cool chord change I never noticed, or cool rhythmic thing, or whatever. So that's pretty fun. Yeah. All right, so every week I do my Vinyl Roundup. I suggest 10 albums that I think you should own, if you don't already, from my vinyl record collection. So I'm going to get rolling here today. Alrighty, I'm going to get started here. Here is a double album from ELO. This is considered by many to be kind of their peak. After this, they did Discovery, and which other people call Disco Very, because it was 1979, and there was some more simplified approach to that record. But this was a double, the last gasp of pompous, overblown, wonderful ELO. And you've got some big hits on here like Turn to Stone, and kind of an interesting cover. It has their spaceship here, very 2001 A Space Odyssey ripoff, almost the same kind of wannabe Concorde space shuttle looking thing that's on that album as well. And inside you got kind of a look at the control room and all that jazz. So I'm in a ELO tribute called Strange Magic. If you want to check them out on Facebook, we have a page on there. Got some samples on there you could check out as well. All right, cool. And in the mid 70s, there was a fantastic collaboration for 2 or 3 albums between Chester Chester Thompson? No. Les Paul and Chet Atkins. Chester and Lester. So anyhow, this won a Grammy, and they are really fun records to listen to. They're basically two guitar duets with a rhythm section, and um, it's mostly jazz standards and things of that nature, but just the way they play off each other is magical. And there's a lot of cool kind of banter at the beginning of every song. Like there's one where Les is like, "Hey, you ever heard of Mel Bay?" And Chet's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Think we should order his book that teaches us how to play?" Late 70s, there was a fantastic fantasy cartoon movie called Heavy Metal, which was based on a kind of a comic book magazine, kind of an adult one, I should say. There was definitely some nudity in it and such. And it came out in about late 78. I remember my dad was an artist and we had a subscription to it from the get-go. So when this came out, I knew what they were referencing. And it's a pretty bizarre movie. You know, it's done in the style that a lot of those strips were. And this contains some really cool tunes. I think my favorite is from Donald Fagen from Steely Dan. There's a tune on here called True Companion that never gets played or mentioned, but it's right up there with the quality of Steely Dan or his first solo, The Nightfly. And there's a mixture of other people on here too. Gosh, Cheap Trick, Blue Oyster Cult, Black Sabbath, Mob Rules. That's great. Grand Funk, Sammy Hagar, Journey. The list is endless. Alrighty, and kind of a British Steely Dan, if you would, 10cc. You know, they had a huge hit with I'm Not in Love, and it is on this particular album, which was kind of a pioneering studio effort. You know, that's the one where they sang a single note on each track of the 12 track or 24 track recorder, whatever it was. So like you pull up the first fader and that might be a C note, C, or I don't know if that's a C, but you know what I mean? Each note on the fader was a different note sung and held. So when you hear this swelling up at the beginning of that song, that's all their voices. And they're basically playing the mixing board, you know, like an instrument, pulling up different faders as the chords change. So anyhow, that's on here. And there's also a really grandiose tune called Une Nuit à Paris, which was, you know, One Night in Paris. And it actually went on to inspire Bohemian Rhapsody, of all things. So, and I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of Chick Corea's Return to Forever. And one of my favorite eras is the first one, when they were just acoustic with piano and Stanley Clarke on bass and Lenny White on drums. This is the first one. And it's one that you probably don't get to hear quite as much as some of the more obvious shreddy fusion ones that came down the pike later. But this is a fantastic, really meditative, relaxed kind of record with some really beautiful music on it. The last salvo of progressive rock genesis. Yeah, this might be. Duke came out in, I think, 1980. And by this point, Phil Collins had started writing his own material and having hits, bigger hits than Genesis ever had in any other context. This one has Misunderstanding on it, which was a really big hit. And this one kind of straddles the line between the pop band they would be in the 80s and 90s and the prog band they were in the 70s. It even has a big suite at the end of it called Duke's Travels, Duke's End, which is as prog as anything they've done pretty much. Great drum sound on this record too. Big step forward for them. So for many folks, that's kind of the last stop when it comes to that prog rock and Genesis, but there's little fleeting moments of it in the 80s and 90s as well, I think. And here's one that is basically the bridge between 70s King Crimson and 80s King Crimson. Robert Fripp put out the solo album Exposure, and there are some really kind of Lark's tonguey, kind of bruising, dissonant instrumentals on here. I particularly like the one where he recorded his neighbors having a fight and he used it as the vocal track while he plays this insane, really terse, angular stuff underneath it. And this is one that was a part of a trio in a loosely based way with Daryl Hall's Sacred Songs and Peter Gabriel's second album, which Fripp produced and played on. There's even some carryover. That tune Exposure is on both albums. You've heard the one on Gabriel's where he goes, Exposure. And this one here, this is the first Rush album I got my hands on back in, I guess, when it was new. Moving Pictures had been the big bandwagon that a lot of people hopped on. But I don't think I was really hopping on a bandwagon. I think I was too young for that. I just thought, oh, I like this band. I want to hear more. So this is the next one they came out with. And it's many people's favorites. I think this has the best bass tone of any album that Rush did for Geddy Lee. And I love Alex's kind of foray into Andy Summers wannabe textural stuff meets ska, reggae, choppy stuff. Came out really fresh. I love the way they put it together. I am not going to sing Exposure ever again unless I have a lot to drink. Now here's one. This one's pretty obscure. I think only about 100 were printed up somewhere in Bulgaria, but it's a groovy little combo that I think is going to catch on one of these days. So keep your eye out for this if you can find it. And still mourning the passing of Eddie Van Halen. I mean, that's a big blow. And thankfully, he gave us a lot of great music over the years. And I have a feeling there's like thousands of hours, more of it in the vaults. And once Wolfgang's heart mends, we might get to hear some of it somewhere down the road. But even he said, don't bother. Don't bother expecting any time soon. I don't care. If my dad just died, the last thing I'd be doing is trolling through his vaults, and he's got a brand new album of his own that's actually, I think, going to do really well. The music I heard from it. What'd you think of that Wolfgang stuff, Steven?
I don't think I heard much of it.
Oh, I thought I
might have shared a little bit.
Anyway, well, this is, I think, the coolest Van Halen album. It's my favorite. It's Fair Warning, and it has Unchained and Mean Streets. Those are probably the two biggest tunes on it. And this has just got some of Eddie's greatest playing, and it's kind of a dark and edgy record. And Van Halen, you always think of kind of like party rock, but this has got a little bit of an attitude to it, which I really like. A little bit of a dark attitude. And Todd Rundgren, he was on the road to be the 70s male version of Carole King after putting out his first couple albums. He did an album called Rut, and then he followed it up with one called The Ballad of Todd Rundgren. And then of course he did his mega breakthrough, Something Anything, that had Hello, It's Me on it. Well, he was primed and ready to churn out more of that stuff, and the record company would have loved it. But Todd went in a completely different direction. He got into Ritalin and peyote and did this album called A Wizard, a True Star, which is kind of like Abbey Road Side 2. It's like all these little songs that segue into each other. And it's fantastic. I arguably think this is my favorite Todd Rundgren album. You can go ahead and argue with me about it if you want to, but yeah, Wizard of True Star, fantastic. And side 2 is more originals, and there's also what he calls the Soul Medley, which has that "Ooh, baby, baby," and stuff like that, all put together into this medley. And the first time I heard it, I thought, well, what's he doing? Why is this on here? But now that I've gotten to know Todd so well, I know, oh, okay. He's Blue-Eyed Soul, and here's a big patch of it right in the middle of this record. And he actually plays that sometimes just by itself in a live setting. So anyhow, that's my vinyl confessions. I hope you have those. If not, well, check them out, definitely. Alrighty here. So Steven,
Hey.
why don't you tell folks a little bit about your instructional website real quick here while I go take care of a couple things.
My YouTube channel?
Yeah, tell them about it. Yeah, tell them about it.
Okay. So I've had a YouTube channel for over 10 years now. And at some point I was doing some bass lessons early on. I apologize for losing my voice right before a show. But yeah, I worked a lot on just doing bass arrangements and kind of having fun. I started doing some review videos of different instruments, and people really liked the review videos. I did one about 10 years ago on comparing electric upright basses. That was pretty cool and did really well. And then I just did various things until I found, or this instrument rather found me, I guess, because I have a friend that runs a ukulele website called Rock Class 101, which I think we'll be talking a little bit more about later. But he kind of wanted some bass lessons, bass ukulele lessons on the site. And so I ended up getting a bass ukulele, and my life is forever changed. I end up doing arrangements on this, and just sometimes doing live streams on Thursday nights and stuff on my YouTube channel. And that YouTube channel is youtube.com/Stephen Cox Bass, STEPHENCOXBASS. And it's just become mostly about this instrument, where I teach weekly lessons and do review videos and whatnot. So that's about it.
And you gave him the address?
I did. I'll probably type it in for him.
Okay, well, we're going to take a peek at your page before we're done anyway, I think.
Okay.
So I had mentioned that we were going to take a look at the top 25 progressive rock albums from this year. I'm curious to see how many you guys have. I have to admit, I haven't heard them all myself, but I have to also admit that I'm not quite the consumer of fresh music that I once was. As a matter of fact, I think I'm almost going in the other direction, where I'm digging up all this old vinyl and stuff. But I'm always open to hearing new stuff that's great. So let's take a peek here and do a little more screen sharing. So take a look. Anything look familiar, Steven?
Oh, yeah. Looks like you had a few of these guys on your show.
You're right. The top 4 were all guests on our show in the past 8 months or so.
Awesome.
And, Randy McStein was just on a few days ago. Him and Marco Miniman actually have cranked out a second album already. And it really builds upon the potential that the first one had, big time. It's really much more varied. So I'm not sure where it lands on people's lists. This list isn't in any particular order. Of course, I'm going to put my guests on the top of the list, but and those were all great records. That New Kansas album was probably the best thing that they've done in decades. I thought the return to form on the last album, the Prelude Implicit, was really good and heading in the right direction. But adding Tom Brislin to the mix really upped the ante with them, and the new album really shows it. As a matter of fact, one of the best songs on it is the one that Tom wrote and sings, the song The River Sang. Yeah, it's a great tune. So yeah, love that. I'd love to see that material live one of these days. And Rick Wakeman's Red Planet was, if you like just straight up instrumental Rick without any silliness or frilly lightweight keyboard sounds, this is the record for you. It's very tasteful. It reminds me sort of Six Wives, that kind of ballpark, which was his most popular record, his first solo record, The Six Wives of Henry VIII. And lots of great Moog soloing all over it. It's strong, and people really liked it. And Nick DiVirgilio, who you might remember from Spock's Beard, has a new solo album out as well called Invisible that is really cool. He's done some different videos for it, and he did a kind of a dark cover of Money. That's what I want. That's what I want. Da, 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 da. That song, he turned it into this kind of slow burn kind of tune. It's really pretty slick. So there's some other choices, the perennial favorites, the Flower Kings. You get it, Stephen? Perennial Flower Kings. Put out a new record this year that I hear is really good, Islands. And along with other people, there's some classic groups and artists on here that are very consistent, like Neil Morse. He former Spock's Beard singer. He is very consistent and very epic, as is Royna Stolt, who is the guitarist in the Flower Kings. Those guys can write a epic sidelong thing, like at the drop of a hat, and they're always catchy and provocative. Anyhow, they are back at it. And Pendragon's another group that been around for many years. Pattern Seeking Animals are some of the guys that were in Happy the Man. I believe Frank Wyatt and Stan, the guitar player, I forget his last name. And John Petrucci's back with a solo record. I think he had one before. This is his follow-up many years later. And he got back together with Mike Portnoy, who had left Dream Theater over 10 years ago. So the fact that they're back together playing is great news for their fans. And they also are doing a Liquid Tension Experiment album, which is basically John and Mike along with Jordan Rudess and Tony Levin. As a matter of fact, Tony Levin was on the show last week, and we talked a little bit about it. So check out that episode if you want to hear some details. It's really cool. Let's see. My old friends are back again. I've seen them many times over the years at Nearfest and Prague Day. The Tangent is another one that you hear a lot about in Prague circles. And Deep Purple, Whoosh. That's like their 7th or 8th album with Steve Morse at the helm, playing guitar and writing. And I've heard really good stuff about it. And we keep thinking, oh, this is probably the last one they're doing. And then I'll be darned if they don't come out with another record. And I think that was the talk this time. And already they're talking about doing yet another one. Steve Morse is the youngest guy in the group. And he says he'll probably drop before they do, that they just are, just like the Energizer Bunny. And Dennis DeYoung, you might remember him from Styx. He still sounds the same. It's kind of nice when classic singers age gracefully, and it's not always the case. And Dennis has a new group that's, I guess he's had it a while now. It's kind of his wannabe Styx. There's a wannabe Tommy Shaw, a wannabe JY live, so they can do the whole Styx show and not just the Dennis songs. But he's also gone in and finally done a new record. And I heard a lot of good stuff. The track I heard from it kind of reminded me of Come Sail Away or something in that ballpark. And Pineapple Thief, they were kind of that kind of porcupine tree sounding ballpark. And it's been a while since I've heard them. But when I did maybe 15 years ago, they were kind of in that camp. I'm sure they've grown a lot since then. And this album has Gavin Harrison, who was Porcupine Tree's drummer. And he also plays with King Crimson now. He's one of the most crisp and articulate drummers to ever come down the pike in Prague land or elsewhere. Really great. And Sons of Apollo, that's one of Mike Portnoy's many super groups. Includes, I want to say, Derek Sherinian, who's right below that, and Billy Sherwood, Ron Bumblefoot Tao. How do you say his name? Okay. Yeah, those guys. Total, steroid, pumped up prog metal of the highest order, and super catchy. And Goblin, another classic group. And Haken, one of the coolest modern prog bands around. I think if you haven't checked them out, look into them because they are super eclectic. They're sometimes super heavy, but other times they're totally not. And they're many things. So check it out. And Randy George, he's done a lot of cool stuff with Mike Portnoy and Neil Morse. And they did a cover. They like to do covers. Those guys love to do covers. And I love to do covers too, actually. So anyhow, they have a new cover record, number 3, and then Tangerine Dream, another classic. So there's some fresh stuff on this list, and there's some classics that have been around for decades. And it's great to see those guys still being inspired to make music all these years later. Cool. Well, I hope you all are doing well. Thanks for dropping by. Hey, Susan. Hey, Rob. Hey, Melissa. Hey, Steven. Hey, Steven.
Hey. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. In a few minutes, I'm going to have a highlight reel of different interviews that we did this year. Most of my shows are long, and that's kind of the idea, is we do a very deep look at a band or an artist or a genre. And I've thought about chopping out little sound bites, but I've never done it before. So tell me what you think of this. Some people that do what I do um, do that a lot. As a matter of fact, they'll take it and just kind of dull them out to you little bites every week. Um, and I'm curious what you all think about that. If I did a kind of a side thing called Soul Bites or something, where I just give you, what does Rick Wakeman think of his capes? Where did he get them? Well, here's the answer, and just kind of, you know, just put, focus on one particular thing at a time. Hey, Reese. Hey, Kevin. Thanks for coming by. Good to see you. Happy holidays. So we are going to look right now. Like I said, that highlight reel is coming up, and we're going to hear stories from Tony Levin, Rick Wakeman, Jon Anderson, to name a few. So stick around. I'm going to play that here in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, though, Stephen and I are going to show you our favorite YouTube pages for 2020. And also, we're going to have a musical interlude shortly, a prog rock holiday classic. So stick around for that. Our vocalist Matt Smith from Story of a Life is going to come by and sing a classic that Greg Lake wrote. I think you know the one I'm talking about. So stick around for that. That's coming up in a few minutes. Well, I think we should start with Stephen's page. Stephen has done quite well on YouTube with his instructional videos. He's got about 5,000 subscribers, 5,000 and a half, somewhere in that ballpark.
Getting close to there. Yep.
And I think he mentioned a bit about his page before, but tell him a little bit more. You specialize in ukulele basses as a rule.
Yes.
You do play other basses too, and they pop up occasionally on here, but
they do.
The U bass is your specialty, and you're one of the foremost guys on the internet when it comes to them and lessons, I think.
As far as I know, I'm the only person doing weekly content. So when I do videos every Tuesday, that's a weekly. Most of the time it's a lesson. Every now and then it's a review video on a different model of a U-bass. But I don't think there's, knock on wood, I don't think there's anybody else out there doing weekly lessons on U-bass.
Well, that's pretty cool. Drop by and check it out, everybody. It's /Stephen Cox Bass. All right, let's see here. Here's one that you suggested, Stephen. I've seen Adam's videos a few times, and they're pretty compelling. Tell us a bit about what you like about his channel.
So I found his channel over a decade ago, and he was doing a lot of the same stuff that I was doing. He was doing tapping arrangements on bass and all sorts of other things. He did a tapping version of Donna Lee that he took down, but he has a version of the Maple Leaf Rag. If you want to see, it's like the earliest video that he has on his channel. And since then, he went to school for music and decided to delve into music theory and making more lessons on a whole bunch of different things. You can see some of these below, like the Christmas songs, but they're in 15/16 time. So sometimes he'll take a concept and just kind of jazz up something that's already there. He'll reharmonize things and do videos on how to do that and what he was thinking while he was doing that. There's a little technology stuff going on with this infinite bass solo thing that you see on the video right below his name. And he just does a whole bunch of different theory things and kind of music history, little nuggets and things like that, theory history kind of stuff. And he's just very intellectual about music. So kind of like Rick Beato, but I don't know, just a totally different angle on the same kind of stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, he's great. And I like the way he comes at these subjects. It's like he hones in on just like talking about an interval or a chord type or a mode. Yeah, I think he's the one that did the video where it's like they were talking about the Locrian mode being like the stinkiest, most unusable one of them all, and he challenged his friends to write some good music with it.
There it is right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth video on there.
That's
5
right.
musicians,
Yeah.
1 scale.
That was great. I like it when people approach things from that angle. Very cool. All right. This is a channel I ran across this summer. It's a couple guys that are in college, and they sit back, and it's, these reaction videos are hot stuff these days. And most of them I think are total shit. But this one is fun. And I think the reason is because they like a lot of the music that I like, and it's one of these things where they swear they've never heard Close to the Edge, and then they sit down and drink a little bourbon and listen to it and tell you what they think. And it's fun. They've done, any show that dissects Yes is cool in my book, because that just doesn't happen too often. They've done 4 or 5 songs: Heart of the Sunrise, Owner, Roundabout, but tons of other stuff. As you could see this week, they checked out Wonderful Christmas Time from Paul McCartney and thought it was kind of weird. And like those little offbeat blats that come from the synthesizer and stuff, they didn't quite like those. Anyhow, this is a fun one, and they have pretty good taste. It reminds me of my record collection. Like, just looking at this, everything on there I love. So if you like reaction videos and that lean in the more proggy direction, check out Andy and Alex. And here's one that both Stephen and I voted for. The Mac Daddy of musical instructors and dissectors on YouTube, Rick Beato. His show is kind of an inspiration to do this, because occasionally he has interviews. So I thought, well, yeah, I'd like to do that, But the other things he does, I enjoy even more. He's sometimes gets very theoretical, like Adam that we just mentioned. Other times he has his What Makes This Song Great series, where he brings up like backing tracks, solos, different instruments. Somehow he gets his hands on the multi-tracks, and he can pull away things and bring up different things and point them out. So you really do kind of learn how songs are put together when you can kind of strip it away and just hear one part at a time. So yeah, he's got it going on. He's got over 2 million subscribers, and with good reason, and I'm sure he worked really hard to make it happen. So yeah, check it out. He's got so many cool suggestions, and I love it when he dissects a good prog tune. There's look up the one for Dance on a Volcano from Genesis on his page. It's one of my favorites. That one is really, really cool. All right, here's another guy that really inspired me, who just started doing a show about the same time I did because of COVID and just looking for something to do. He is a Nashville session guitarist named Tom Bukovac, and he's also kind of a progger, which I thought was really cool. And he's just hanging out in his garage. He'll come in and play some amazing guitar for maybe 5 minutes. And then he just answers mail and shoots the shit. And he's very matter of fact, very laid back, no pretension, and just great. And his beautiful wife has an amazing voice. She's a dead ringer for Renee Zellweger. And they love Genesis. They've done some great versions of More Fool Me, the tune off of Selling England that Phil Collins sang. They're big Phil Collins fans. And most recently they did Your Own Special Way. And but the first one I saw was a version of Ripples or Entangled, one or the other from Trick of the Tail. Anyway, look them up. They're friggin' awesome. And Tom is just ace, yeah, great stuff. And here's another kind of almost obvious one. You remember Daryl's House was a great series that was on, I don't know where it was, YouTube or wherever, where Daryl Hall would invite over people like Todd Rundgren to play a whole show and do each other's songs together. And the episodes with Todd are some of my favorites. But he's done amazing stuff with almost everybody. People like CeeLo or Cheap Trick, quite a variety. And what they did is they built a club up there where you could go play called Daryl's House. And it kind of looks a little like the house that he had his show in. And his bass player, Kasim Sultan, did some recent shows. He did a great birthday celebration, which is in the top row there. Anyway, just top shelf talent on this show. So if you're looking for good live music, this is a good place to go. And here's another one of yours. Who's this guy, Steve?
All right. So this guy is the most well-known bass player on YouTube. He's very meme-driven, so he connects with younger audiences, but a lot of times he covers songs, that have been around for a long time. So he kind of connects with people across the board. Lately, he's been doing things where he just plays different instruments other than bass, but he's mainly a bass player, and so they're just silly things because he usually doesn't do that. But yeah, he's known for doing things like taking his bass to Africa to play Africa, and things like that. And he took his bass under a bridge to play the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge. And he did a really cool bass arrangement of both of those songs where it was just solo bass. And so he's very influential for like the next generation coming up, because I think they're very into these short little low attention span kinds of things where there are memes that connect to pop culture and stuff. And so he's I actually have a student that picked up a U-bass because of him. And and so I think it's pretty cool. But people like this are going to inspire the next generation of musicians, and maybe even the next generation of musicians that take the instruments more seriously, because in order to play stuff like this, you have to have more than a basic knowledge of music, to arrange kind of complex stuff like that. So
Sure.
That's why I put him on this list. He's very influential.
All right. And here's another guy, the one of the most talented musicians of his generation, kind of a mutant alien with the ability to hear every pitch, every harmony, every
play
rhythm,
every instrument,
and then go and harmonize with himself like 12 Ways to Sunday. And it's pretty brilliant to behold. The ear this guy has. He's been playing with the likes of Herbie Hancock and Quincy Jones. And if those guys think you're great, then you're freaking awesome. Anyway, his name's Jacob Collier, and he's got a Grammy nomination this year. He's up against some typical stuff, and I really hope he wins. Kind of like when Esperanza Spalding beat Justin Bieber, or Steely Dan beat Kid Rock, or whoever the fuck it was that year. Excuse my French. And here's a guy I really like, Jens Larson. I've been working on trying to improve my jazz playing, and he's really inspiring. He really lays it out there in a way that's easy to understand, and he has standard notation. He's got tab if you want it. It's all there. And I'm always trying to be better, because jazz is something that I've been intrigued by and enjoyed on some level my whole life. My dad was a big fan, and some of my earliest memories are hearing him play, Miles Around the House or Charlie Parker. And I was always kind of, in a way, it's almost like an homage to him that I'm learning it. Somebody once asked me, why the jazz in your playing? And it's like, I just like it, and I like those kind of chords and that kind of harmony. And, I'm a novice when it comes to playing over those chords. I'm pretty good at stringing them together. So now I'm trying to get better about playing them. And I actually play a bit of jazz on the side with a group called the Atlanta Wire Choir with my friends Tim Snapke and Adrian Ash. And the lovely Christine Strain is our vocalist. So maybe we can get a chance to play some stuff for you all one of these days. It would be great. And my friend Leonardo Pavkovic is the founder of Moon June Music. And this is probably my favorite progressive rock record label, because they go for the more fusion-y side of things. Like, for instance, last week I had the Stickmen on my show, including Tony Levin and Leonardo. He made it happen, and I'm so grateful. He's a great guy, and I wish him happy holidays. So if you're looking for fresh progressive rock that isn't, in that classic synth ELP yesy vein, check out his label. If you want something more fusiony, he was a good friend of Alan Holdsworth. Alan Holdsworth was on his label. It's like that caliber, that ballpark. So check it out, Moon June Music. And here's one that Stephen and I both know. It's our friend Drew, and Stephen has done videos for this channel more than many times, actually. Yeah.
And actually, I was just, I think I was telling people earlier, the reason that I got into Ubase was because he wanted bass ukulele lessons on his site. And so I got one for that reason, and then realized I liked playing it so much that I just became all about it. So, but he does some excellent chord melodies and arrangements, and he gets some other talented ukulele players on there too. So you can see some different guys on that top row.
Yeah, that's Drew there by the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually on his website, there's a really cool interview with me back when our album came out back in the Jurassic days. If you want to look it up, just look up Sean Toner Rock Class 101 on YouTube, and you can hear kind of the process for putting that record together and look at some of my gear that I had. I've got more now. Here's another guy that you suggested.
Yeah, so this guy kind of he likes doing a lot of interesting things. Like you can see all the different instruments that are going on there. I think one of the reasons I kind of got into his channel was because he did a lot of like metal stuff, but he also did a thing where he tried to play like U-bass, but really metal stuff on the U-bass by plugging it through the iPhone or something using one of those iRig things. And so that video kind of caught my eye. But he goes along with another guy that's kind of on here, I believe, where they but he plays a lot of heavy music. There was one time where he just does weird little quirky things, and one was getting someone to record metal music like the old-fashioned way, like they'd record in the 20s or something, on wax. Funny. And just trying to figure out if that worked or how they could do it with how loud the metal band was and stuff. So just really weird, obscure, kind of random novel things on this channel that are really
very
fun.
Cool. Rob Scallon.
Yeah. And
here's one that's kind of familiar.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
I've never seen that one.
So thank you, Stephen, for the inspiration. I'm
You're welcome.
532 subscribers in 8 months. The first 500 are the hardest to get, I hear. So I was really glad to get over that hump, and are excited about the future. Because I think once you get more subscribers, well, it just spreads you around YouTube more. And that's the beauty of it. I've had videos that do amazing. For me, over 1,000 views in a week, and then other ones are kind of slow growers, I guess you'd say. But I think one of these days this channel is going to break wide open, and all these old videos will get watched a lot more.
So predict soon.
Don't you agree, Stephen? It's just a matter of just sticking with it, and enjoying those little triumphs along the way, So I'm thankful to all of you for tuning in and subscribing. And if you have yet to, please do. It's /Soul Night Live at YouTube. So, and I have every show here. There's over 50 of them, all kinds of good stuff. So check it out. And my friend Pete Pardo is another one of my inspirations for doing these kind of shows. He runs a progressive rock and metal review site that's been around for almost 20 years now, Sea of Tranquility, and started doing this show maybe 5 years ago. And he's worked his way up, and just has a great batch of guests, and he does a lot of other shows too. As you can see, sometimes the shows are him chatting with friends about a subject. Other times it's maybe a live concert of some sort, or a tribute, like for instance to Leslie West, who passed away this week. He was quick to make one of those, and it's all very timely. So anyhow, Pete continues to be an inspiration, and he's kind of the model I'm shooting for. So I'll keep plugging away. Stevie T, what a goofball, but what a shredder. He's all that and more. This guy Steven suggested him, and he cracks me up too. He's
Oh yeah, we've been sharing his videos back and forth just on a
yeah, and
just
he's
for a laugh.
all about making these videos with quick edits, and he might dress up in a costume and pretend just all kinds of silly stuff.
And the
It's very
silliest
comedic,
faces you'll ever see
but
on
he's
YouTube.
also an amazing musician. I mean, he'll say he's going to play a Chuck Berry solo, and then he'll do like Under a Glass Moon from Dream Theater and go, oh, just joking. The fact that he could just play anything like that and do it with panache is pretty cool. Some people find him a little irritating because he is rather over the top and does a lot of these kind of things in the camera all the time. But if you get past that, there's some great playing, and some of them are really funny. Like he did a show where he took other people's solos and improved them, which I thought was pretty funny. So anyhow, yeah, check him out. He's quite the comedian. What do you think, Steven?
Oh yeah. I love what he's doing. I think occasionally the silly faces and the screens goes a little too far for me, but yeah, where he goes a little bit long on the making silly faces and doing stuff like that. But a lot of it's really fun content, and if you want to laugh, it's pretty good. And one of the highlights I think was when he'd like talk about how to record a Green Day song or something, and so he'd like make up his own thing within the style of somebody else like that. And then of course he'd add the shred solo in at the very end, so it's like it would sound pretty good. He's good at imitating them and breaking down what they're doing, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of sweep arpeggios in a Green Day sounding song, and so it's pretty entertaining.
Way out of context, but cool stuff. Yeah. Alrighty, and my old friend Baylor Trucks has a fairly new channel he started. Basically, he had a list of about 20 albums that he had never heard, despite being, in his 40s. Some things that he just kind of avoided. When you're young, you have your own ideas about what's cool and what isn't. And if it doesn't fit into that category, then you just kind of let it go. And these were albums where he really never heard them, but heard a lot about them. And it's just one of the coolest shows. He's like the most thoughtful and articulate guy, and he's so aware of music and how it's put together. He can really kind of listen to it from that angle. And one of the funniest things is every show starts with a theme song where he basically plays something from the record he's about to talk about. Like he did like a surf version of Allison when he talked about Elvis Costello. And he did a reggae version of Ziggy Stardust. So it's like I hope he puts out a record of just these themes because they're brilliant. And he really thoroughly listens too. He will listen once and then come back and go, okay, here's my first impression. And then a week later, he'll come back and tell you what he's thought. And he listens to these things 3 times a day, usually. Sometimes on professional headphones, other times just around the house when he's working or whatever. So it's one of these reaction videos, but it's deeper than any I've ever seen, because he's really telling you why, like he tells a story about how he couldn't get past Elvis Costello when he was a kid because he knew people that had interacted with him and thought he was a jerk. And it was like, can he ignore that enough to enjoy this album? And the answer in that particular case was not really, because the music didn't exactly bowl him over. But anyhow, really cool channel. He's just getting rolling. It's got 72 subscribers. So go over there and give Baylor a like. Just type up Baylor Trucks. You may remember his dad. He was the drummer with the Allman Brothers. Alrighty, well, that's the end of our YouTube suggestions of different channels that we really dig. You all right over there, Steven?
Yeah, I was actually going to go give Baylor an ad myself because I don't think I've done that yet.
Yeah, please do.
So that does sound fun. I want to check out what he's got.
There's another thing I guess I should talk about. About a month ago, I mentioned that I was running for office. No, but there's a progressive rock magazine out of the UK called Prog, Prog, and it's probably the biggest, most successful progressive rock magazine there is because it's a pretty short list. And other ones that really went strong for many years have gone by the wayside for various reasons. And that's a shame because this genre doesn't get talked about enough anyway. So the more the merrier, I think, when it comes to publications in print, although print publications are becoming kind of a thing of the past. So I'm enjoying the fact that you can still walk in Barnes and Noble and get this glossy magazine. It's about 11 by 17, full color, and just a who's who of modern progressive rock and lots of classic stuff too. Because that classic stuff really sells. You stick Wakeman on the cover and have a Yes issue, and it's going to sell probably more than putting somebody modern on there. But don't worry that you open it up and there's plenty of modern people in it. Anyhow, they have a readers poll every year, and one of the categories was prog's unsung hero. And I thought, well, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. It was like 3 days before the poll closed, so I didn't know if I'd even make the cut. But I thought I'd give it a try. And it was a top 10 list, and I came in number 5. So thank you all so much for taking the time to vote for me. It was a bit of a lark, honestly. I just thought, well, what the heck? Let me give this a try. And I feel like, I qualify. I've been talking about progressive rock on the internet since the late 90s. Talked about it every day. So I've been spreading the word. So anyhow, I'm thinking about having a few guests pop in here, but I'm kind of running a little behind, so we'll see. So anyway, that's me right there. Number 5. So this will be out in the next issue of Prog Magazine. It should be on the shelves. I don't know. With the way things are going, you'll probably find it on the shelves in America sometime in March. But the e-copy is already out there, and a lot of people. And I think people with a subscription that are in the UK have already received it. That's how I heard about it. And this is a really great magazine. I highly suggest it. And not just because they voted me in here. Keep in mind, nobody at the magazine voted for me. You all voted for me. You're the ones that made it happen. And while I know the people that run it and have been in it a few times, it's never would have happened if you hadn't taken the time to write and say, Sean's the guy. So anyhow, I've done a little writing from time to time. We had a issue 100 icons that change our world, and they asked me to pick one, and I picked Todd Rundgren, of course, because he's got to be in there. I mean, come on. That guy was more prog than a lot of people. Maybe not every day and every album, but he had some stone cold progressive music. So it was great to talk a bit about that. And when our album, the band that Stephen and I are in, Story of a Life, came out, we had a nice piece in there as well talking about it.
I think I was wearing this shirt in that picture.
That very shirt. There you go. Yeah, great. Yeah. All right. And we're going to talk after the highlight reel, which is coming up in a minute. In about 5 minutes. We're going to talk a bit about our band and play you some of our music. So stick around. It's instrumental, it's funky, it's fusiony, it's proggy, it's all of the above. The kind of stuff I like. Just take it all and stick it in a blender and make a margarita out of it. All right. Our singer, here's the thing. We are an instrumental band, but we also do shows where we play covers publicly because it's fun and we like to play them. And we always pick covers that are a little left to center, that are not quite, they're by classic people that you've heard of a million times, but we try to pick the less obvious songs. So that's kind of what the bulk of our set list is. And I actually have a highlight reel I'll play you of a little bit of our live stuff coming up a little later. But in the meantime, our singer, Matthew Smith, has a Friday night show with his wife, Amy Lynn, or they play music. Let me see. I just got to find where I put this.
And he covers a little bit of everything when he gets on there with his wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
They go more obscure than we do sometimes.
Oh, they definitely do. Matt's amazing. He's been one of the most talented people I've ever known, and it's he elevates any project he's part of and inspires us all to dig deep, you know. So it's a real pleasure. Matt did a fantastic cover of I Believe in Father Christmas that I wanted to share with you all. Check it out here.
They said there'd be snow at Christmas. They said there'd be peace on earth. But instead it just kept on raining. A veil of tears for the virgin birth. I remember one Christmas morning, winter's light and the distant choir, and the peal of a bell and that Christmas tree smell, and eyes full of tinsel and fire. They sold me a dream of Christmas. They sold me a silent night. And they told me a fairy story till I believed in the Israelite. And I believed in Father Christmas, and I looked to the sky with excited eyes, till I woke with a yawn in the first light of dawn, and I saw him through his disguise. Christmas, I wish you a brave new year. All anguish, pain, and sadness, leave your heart, let your road be clear. They said there'll be snow at Christmas. They said there'll be peace on earth. Hallelujah, Noel, be it heaven or hell, the Christmas we get we deserve.
Yeah, that was Matthew Smith. And Matt's going to swing by here for a minute and say hi real quick.
There he is. Hey, Matt.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going, bro?
All right.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing the cover with us. That was beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for playing that. It was weird.
yeah, being on the show like that. Yeah, you're the first musical guest. I've had a few people.
Oh wow! Okay.
I've had a few people strum some chords and play a lick or two here or there, but that's it. You know, so
nice, very cool.
And I just
thanks for having me, and congrats on the channel. You guys seem like you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's amazed me. You know, I'm hopeful for another year of this. We'll see what happens.
Right.
It'd be nice if I reached a point where I could do some of these in person.
I think we'll for a little bit longer.
You know, when somebody cool comes to town and be like, "Hey, can I just come by around 4 and chat for an hour?"
Right. Yeah. That'd be great.
So we'll see how it goes. But
yeah,
it's been nice just getting a chance to learn things about my favorite artists that I haven't already known. So
sure, of course, absolutely. It's kind of like a dream come true for, I imagine, somebody like you who's such like the prog file, I guess. Is there a term for that?
You
have like an audio file. What's
progophile?
Yeah,
sounds creepy.
Sounds kind of weird.
After I said it, I was like, I should not have said
it. I don't know, but yeah. And you know, and I love all kinds of music. You know, I mean, I've been a big proponent of progressive rock forever. But you know, I mean, you name it. If it's good, I'm there. You know, I'm
I
not
hear
too
that.
picky. You know.
Yeah.
And I was telling folks about Strange Magic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Matt had been part of this ELO tribute, and I heard about it. It's like, if you could ever squeeze me in there, you know, I love that stuff. And
Absolutely.
they did,
Absolutely.
and
It's no, it's such a fun project. You know, the music is so dense. You know, there's so much to work with there, and just trying to figure out how to fit it all in, get all the pieces put together. It's been a unique challenge, and one I look forward to getting back to one of these days.
Well, I think we were on a roll, and I think people are going to love it once we get out there and really do it. You know, we had a great show lined up right before COVID hit, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah.
And 9 months later, the club we were going to play at isn't even open anymore.
That's right.
And it's a shame because it was beautiful and one of the best clubs in town. It's called the Vista Room. So I'm hoping that the gentleman that owns it can start over again. I think a lot of these venues will be like that. Some of them are just going to have to close until things resume, and then they can spring up in a new location or go back to the old one or whatever. But what's the sense of paying rent on an empty room for a year? You know,
especially one that nice.
Yeah, a lot of them are like that. There's a place, a jazz club in LA called the Baked Potato that's kind of doing that. That's like, we're going into hibernation, but we're going to leave the sign on just to let you know that we will be back, you know. And a lot of places have had to do that if they can afford to just walk away, you know. So anyhow, I'm hopeful.
Well, hopefully they can pull it back together for sure.
But yeah, and hopefully maybe we can do some sort of ELO live stream thing or something, you know.
I'd love it.
Maybe when things warm up a bit.
Yeah.
I think we should, definitely. And it's just been a pleasure getting to know Jeff Lynne's music, you know. I mean,
oh man, absolutely.
Man, you know, that guy doesn't get enough credit, and I think people
he's so underrated, and it's a shame. I mean, there's so much, like I was saying, the music itself is dense, but I mean, there's not very many, like, if any, bad moments, you know, like everything is so I think crucial.
He's just
his identity and just his legacy. It's just
he's
phenomenal.
so consistent, you know, and you know, that's a goal we all strive for, but you know, he's great. And I think people sometimes don't really grasp the depth that is there once you start digging under the layers. You know, you just think he's don't bring me down or whatever, but there's so much more going on than that, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, those first few albums in particular were very ambitious and proggy.
Definitely.
So what's your favorite?
That third one is a masterpiece.
Is that one of your favorites there?
I mean, it's so hard to say. I mean, you know, El Dorado, it's really hard to beat that. The Time album later on, I've fallen in love with that album over the last year, really. I've probably listened to that album more than any of the others, and that's saying something because I think I've listened to more ELO this year than just about any other band.
That's awesome.
And it's just phenomenal work. It's hard to pick a favorite. It's like a favorite few.
Right, I hear you.
It really just depends on the mood. I mean, that second, the second one, I'm spacing on the name right now, is just so weird. It's such like a transitional album, but it's got some really great moments on it for sure.
Yeah, that early stuff I don't think gets enough attention, you know. People kind of pick up at like the fifth one, Face the Music, and go forward, and that's really his big run of hits, you know.
Oh man,
but there's
lots
of
like
great
song after song after song after song.
But there's lots of great songs on those first four albums that people just maybe aren't aware of. I think the only big hit out of all of them was Telephone Line, and you know, prior to that, that's about it. You know, I think it was
Get It Out of My Head, Showdown. You know, like
there's
that's kind of about it.
There's a few, but once he got to, you know, there's something about Face the Music. You know, Strange Magic is just a perfect little pop tune.
Absolutely.
And it has great changes. You know, it's like very, very simple, but awesome. You know, that augmented chord in that verse is what does it for me. You know, it's kind of like, all right, Jeff. Yeah, that's a stuff.
Just his use of the minor four chord. I mean, he uses it in so many of those songs, and I never get tired of it.
You're right.
He never gets old.
He has ways of sneaking it in there, you know. I like it. Sometimes he'll do that kind of, what is it, a backdoor dominant, where you do like a D9 into E major.
Oh yeah,
where you're basically the top of that D
trick. That is
right,
so
because when you're in E, the A chord is the 4 chord, and you make it minor, it's A minor.
Right.
Well, the top portion of that D9 chord is an A minor triad. So he's still doing that move, but he's making it into a flat 7, resolving it to the root. And
it gets such, at least from my perspective, it elicits a different reaction from me. Like the minor 4, I'm like, oh yeah, and then that chord, the dominant.
The minor 4 just makes me think of like 50s rock, while the minor 7 makes me think of like the verse to Christmas Time Is Here.
Right. It's got a little bit more stank on it.
A little bit. Yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to take a look at some highlights from this year's interviews. So if you want to stick around and hang out, please do, and if you want to pipe up and talk about anything, but I'm going to go ahead and get this reel going, and we'll kind of do them one by one. I've got about 30 minutes worth of stuff, just some choice stories. And I warn you all in advance, I did this with my phone. I didn't really have it in me to download every one of these shows and go chop out the piece. So I just held my phone up to the computer. So it's a little on the cheap, but this whole show is kind of on the cheap. Yeah, when you get right down to it. It's about content. It isn't about bells and whistles and flashy thumbnails. I'll leave that to other people. Maybe one day.
Thumbnails pretty flashy.
I may have a flashy thumbnail phase coming up. You just don't know. All right, let's see.
Here's hoping.
Progressing for the new year.
Yeah, okay, let's see here. And I hope my hand wasn't too shaky when I do this. You make it a little seasick. Okay, let's see here. All righty. Can you see that?
Yes.
You can? All right, let's get it rolling here. Here's our theme song, Globe Trekker. Now, this first one is with Tony Levin. He was on with the Stickmen a couple days ago.
For some of the folks that are tuned in right now, they might not be familiar with the touch instruments. Can you give them a little background on them? Tony, how did you, you're kind of maybe the best known guy that plays stick. How did you run across it in the first place and start playing it?
Well, way back. I was a studio player, and I used to practice obnoxiously between takes. I don't do that anymore, but some people do. And I used to hammer on with my fingers just for the heck of it. And so when Emmett Chapman released, in about 1975 or 76, released an instrument that was designed to be played that way, I heard about it from a lot of players who were frankly sick of hearing me do that. And they said, hey, Tony, there's an instrument. Why don't you just get that and stop doing it on the bass? So within a month, maybe 5 or 6 people said, you should check this out. So next time I was in California, I met with Emmett himself, Emmett Chapman, and got the instrument from him, right from his hands, and began to play it. And I quickly took it on some sessions, some of which, even the look of it frightened the producer, and they didn't want to hear it. And sometimes they went, oh, I want that. And I couldn't play it very well at the beginning. It was quite a process for me controlling the thing, and I began right away playing it live with Peter Gabriel on stage. Hence, a lot of people started to see me. There were other bands, by the way, one called Kitty Hawk, with multiple stick players in California. There were other players playing it, but I was one of the early players, and I was probably the one who got the most exposure from Peter Gabriel, and later, subsequently, with King Crimson.
Well, that was awesome. You know, I always wondered where he got his start with the Chapman sticks, so now we know. All right. Can you guys hear everything okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Coming
Okay, excellent. All right, next up we've got bass player for Pink Floyd from the 80s and 90s, Guy Pratt. He's also played on every David Gilmour solo album since the 80s or 90s. No, since the 90s, you know. I think they were all done.
Madonna and some everything.
Yeah, on an Island and Rattle That Lock. He's on both of those. And he was also with Roxy Music for a little while there. Let's check it out.
So, tell me about the Fender that you got from David Gilmour.
This one,
Yeah, wow. What year is that?
1960.
Wow. And did David buy it like new back in the day?
No. What's great is David got it off his mate Rick Wills, who was
who played with Foreigner. He replaced.
That's right, and who was in his who also briefly played for Roxy Music.
Okay.
And
A long list of bass players in that band.
I was number 11.
Wow. Okay.
I was number 11. I was interviewed in a Roxy Music documentary. I happened to be in the band when the documentary was made, and it's quite funny. I did say, yeah, you don't want to take a mortgage out based on being Roxy Music's bass player. And I was right. So what was sweet was when I did some recording with Roxy back in 2005, and it was the whole band with Eno and Chris Thomas producing. It was 1972. It was amazing. But when I walked in with this bass, and Phil Manzanera, who's a really good friend anyway, Phil said, "I know that bass." I said, "Really? I know that." And apparently that's the bass that Rick played when he was with Roxy Music. So I brought it back to Roxy Music after 30 years.
That's crazy.
Which is but it's So Rick sold Rick sold it to David. And I can't remember when I first came across it. I think it was at his houseboat, because David didn't really play it. David's not a jazz. He's a precision man.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Even fretless. And he and I remember picking it up and just thinking, oh my god, this is just the shit. And I'd only just really found out about stack wops. I don't know, because it is the holy grail. But there's a lot of shit ones out there, and most of them being refinished or messed with, or the ones I've come across, and they're stupid expensive. But I'd always wanted one, and it was a thing where on the last night of every Floyd tour, I'd be in David's suite at 5 a.m. Because I can't give you 50 grand for that bass. No, I'll give you 100 grand for that bass. Guy, you haven't got 100 grand. No, bah. Because he'd always let me borrow anything or any bits of gear or anything. He was always fantastically generous about that, except for this one bass. And it was just because he knew it wound me up. It was just to wind me up. Like, no, you can't use that.
He probably knew in the back of his mind he was going to give it to you one day.
Maybe, because then he did it. It was my wedding day. I got home from the reception, and there was this fucking case. When I think about it, actually, I hope he didn't leave it on the front door, because that's crazy. And I lived in Notting Hill, man. I mean, you don't leave stuff on the door. It had this big pink bow around it, and it was that fucking bass.
Is that awesome or what? I mean, what a wedding gift.
Yeah, I wish I'd get a gift like that at some point.
Yeah, well, keep your fingers crossed. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah.
Bring it on, right?
Seriously, I got space.
So now we know that David Gilmour is a P-bass guy. Who would have guessed it? All right. Now, next up.
That's why I put up with Roger so long, huh?
Next
Roger
up,
played P-bass.
you know the crazy phrase, more cowbell. Well, this is where it all started with Blue Oyster Cult's drummer, Albert Bouchard. So my good friend Rob Dwyer and I did a co-hosting for that particular episode, because he knows Blue Oyster Cult's catalog inside and out. So I did about half the interview and Rob did the rest. So anyway, I checked with Albert about the genesis of the cowbell being on Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. So check it out.
Your iconic cowbell. I mean, did you ever think that was going to blow up the way it did and become a pop culture phenomenon?
Absolutely not. When I saw the skit, how did he even hear it? I was telling Shelley, when he was mixing it, so Shelley Yakis, who was a mixer, great producer and engineer. Anyway, I said, turn it down. Can you make it a little soft? He goes, if I turn it down anymore, you're not going to be able to hear it at all.
Right. Yeah. Well,
okay,
actually, I went back and re-listened, because it's like, I think I heard it, but I had to go back and really double check, and it's like, yeah, it is in there. So what was the inspiration to have it just run through the whole song? Was that just
that was David Lucas's idea. David was one of the producers, not Bruce Dickinson. That was a product manager that stuck his name on the reissue. But David, he had Randy Brecker do a trumpet solo, and it was a really great trumpet solo, but we didn't like how it sounded in the song. We were like, no, this takes it, we wanted that middle section to go away from the main riff for a little bit, to share a little, vacation from that, and you're going, oh, what is this, and then it comes back, but that was taking it too far. So
I can't imagine a trumpet on that song. That just would have been out of place.
Yeah, well, it was a valid idea, but we didn't like it.
So I'm sure it was amazing. I mean, Randy is, top shelf. But
yeah, fantastic. I just saw him last December.
It's all about context.
Yeah. So we had an extra track. So I said, David, we got an extra track. I got this idea. I want to put a triangle in that section.
Okay. More triangle. It just doesn't have the same sound to it, does it?
He says, yeah, that could work. That would work. That's taking a little bit away from where it was, but not too far. And he said, but you know what? I'll let you do that, but I want you to try a cowbell in the verses. I'm like, cowbell? You mean like a clave, like this Latin thing,
Yeah, like the wood blocks.
Those, they call the pattern a clave.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course.
Certain pattern. They go like ding, 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 ding. That one. Oye, como me va. So he said, no, just quarter notes, just 1, 2, 3, 4. I said, really? Okay. So I did it, bonk, 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 bonk. At first verse, I go, okay, stop. Let me hear that. That doesn't sound. It's not sounding right in my phones. And Don, Buck Dharma is there, and he's, I don't know about this part, David. Let's just go on to the triangle. David's like, no. Put some tape around it. Maybe it's just it's ringing too much. So we put the tape around it. I play it again. I'm like, nah, that's still not right. How about I take a timpani mallet? So I went to my stick bag on the drum kit, got out a timpani mallet, came over and played it, and everybody's like, that's it. It doesn't even sound like a cowbell. It sounds like a woodblock. It's like,
yeah.
All right, hold on a second here. I want to show you all something that goes along with this next clip with Roger Joseph Manning Jr. of Jellyfish and more recently the Licorice Quartet. He's going to tell us about how the cover art came to be for their first album called Belly Button. So I thought I would show it to you before we do that. See that? It's a pretty cool cover, huh? You can see she's kind of covered with blue jelly. What do you suppose that stuff is? You want to guess?
I already know, so I'm not going to say anything.
What do you think, Matt?
Stuff from the inside of a pixie stick.
Not bad. Okay, well, we shall see. And he said that this album was inspired by an album by Sergio Mendes. And as you can see, it kind of looks like they're on a sand dune, but when you open it up, you realize it's a woman's body. So this was this cover that inspired their cover. So what'd you think of the cowbell story? Was that cool or what?
Very, very. Like I don't think of the cowbell when I think of that song though. So I was kind of like with you. I had to go back and listen for it.
It's there. It is there. I don't know how they found it.
I know it now, but at the time,
it wasn't really that loud or obtrusive or anything like they act like.
No, and I think it's kind of funny how it's become legendary for that song, but it's like I can think of a zillion other songs that use it louder and better.
There's one on Division Bell that did a lot of quarter notes, and it was like abrasive almost. I can't remember which song it was.
Huh,
But
I
there
don't
was
remember
a
that.
there was
I'll
a
have to go look
cowbell
at
part. It was just obnoxious.
Who gets the
No-
cowboy
no
credit on
offense.
that?
The only Pink Floyd thing I'll ever refer to as obnoxious, I think, would be that cowbell. But the album's good.
All right. So anyhow, let's hear about the cover for Jellyfish's Belly Button album.
Really heard the background on how those came together, or even who the little red-haired girl is. I'm wondering if you know her all these years later and all that.
No, it's a little more matter of fact than that, but I'm happy to share. So when we were dreaming about, because it looked like we were actually going to get to make this first record and had a budget for album art and an art director and all those proper things, we started fantasizing about what we wanted to do. And we were, basically the album cover is the merging of two influences. One will be no mystery, which was, for the first pressing at least, Mad Magazine, which I know you grew up with. But they had the fold-out puzzle in the
That
back.
thing at the end, yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to do one of those, but not have it be wacky. We just thought it would be fun for the album art to do that, to have two different pictures. So we set out to do that, and a good buddy of mine actually drafted up a concept of what that would look like so we could show the art director. And I'm actually in the process of uploading that to Facebook to show
the first piece of it.
Yeah, I've uploaded part 1, and I'm going to upload part 2 of his sketch for that. And the record company said, sure, let's try to make that happen. Then we fused that with one of our favorite Sergio Mendes Brazil 66 album covers on A&M Records, which is basically the band looks like they're performing on a bunch of sand dunes out in the desert with a sunset.
Oh, nice.
And of course, when you open the gatefold, you see it's not a sand dune at all. It's the torso and hip of a woman's body. And on the back of the album, you see her leg come down. But they had airbrushed it so much and put this nice sunset that it looks very deserty. And we just thought that was the greatest. Like, what would our version of that look like? So, with the art director's help, that's how we painted the woman. You know, and of course in the '60s, there's no shortage from Goldie Hawn on Laugh-In to other album art where, well, I mean, hippies were body painting themselves ad infinitum. So there's all kinds of album covers with, you know, playmates with psychedelic body paint on them.
Sure.
So we were doing some
Herb
our
Alpert
version.
album, you know,
With the whipped cream, of course,
Under the
was
Lights,
inspirational.
inspired a lot of covers.
Well, that's where the toothpaste came from. So that's Crest sparkly
Oh, is
toothpaste
that what
for
it is?
kids.
'Cause I just thought, well, there's the jelly, you know, that's kind
Right.
of jelly.
And exactly. I mean, it looks like some kind of jelly substance. And I believe the art director came up with that, again, harkening to the whipped cream. So we just like merged all of our favorite album covers into one thing.
Yeah.
We did not know the model. She was hired by the art director. And the big, you know, piece of interesting trivia from that photo shoot, because it was fairly straightforward, was that nobody knew that Crest toothpaste, because of the menthol in it, that it would be cold feeling on the skin, particularly if you left it there. When you use it in your mouth, it's in and out of your mouth in 2 minutes.
Minty fresh.
You're minty fresh. You don't think of it as, oh, my mouth is cold. It's uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, she had it on her body for over an hour as we're trying to plan the photo shoot. And she started feeling really uncomfortable and cold, like she was getting the chills. Because she's just in her bikini, and then she's got toothpaste all over her.
Right.
So we had to try to wrap up the photo shoot as quick as possible so she could shower off and avoid hypothermia.
So now you know. You didn't guess it was toothpaste, did you?
Yeah, I already knew, so I couldn't say anything.
What do you think, Matt?
Sounds like a tough gig.
Yeah, I imagine that when something feels cold because of a chemical reaction, that it probably ends up leaving red marks all over you after the fact. So imagine she had that pattern on her for a day or two after. They may not know about it, but she probably gotta find her and interview her now.
Yeah, no doubt. Mystery girl. And the little red-haired girl he was referring to was on the cover of their next album, Spilt Milk. And she was just like a child actress they paid to come and act like a little brat and she actually became one before it was over. She got real tired and needed a nap or something and kind of threw a fit. So at least she wasn't covered with toothpaste. All right. Next up, you guys know this guy, Steve Hackett from Genesis. I had the pleasure of chatting with him a couple times this year, just phone interviews. So there's not a whole lot to look at here, but I always wanted to ask him about the genesis of his two-handed tapping technique, and here I asked him point blank where it came from.
The two-handed tapping, we first heard it on Giant Hogweed, but I'm guessing you didn't just think it up that day. What was your initial inspiration, and when did you first try it?
I was trying to play something that sounded a little bit like J.S. Bach, and I was using it on that album, the Nursery Crime album. On the very first track, there's a solo that employs that technique, and as I say, I was trying to play a line that sounded a little bit like Bach. It was probably a triplet figure, and I figured the best way to play that particular phrase fast was to do it on one string, and to hammer on and hammer off with the left hand, and or to tap on and off if you like, and with the other hand I was using the flat of the nail to do it and pulling off. So hammering on and hammering off with the nail, and I wondered if I could do that at speed, if I could get that technique in time, and I started using it live with the band first of all, and it worked. It worked very well, so I started recording it on those Genesis albums, especially those first three albums, Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, and Selling by the Pound. I was using it for that. And as far as I know, no one else was doing that on electric guitar at the time. So I had guys who were saying, "How did you play that phrase? It's incredibly fast. How did you do that with the plectrum?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm avoiding the pick altogether. I'm not using the plectrum. So you're using the fretboard like the keyboard, and it's a technique that enables you to play so fast. It's a complete blur, a salvo of notes, and it's part of the language of guitar shredders. If you want to play fast these days, most of the time, somebody, if they're playing electric guitar, will employ some of that."
Well, cool. And next up, Kansas keyboardist Tom Brislin dropped by to talk about their new album, The Absence of Presence, which is one of the top prog albums of 2020, highly suggested. And before, he was actually with Yes on their symphonic tour, which I think was 2000, or about the year 2000, I think. The magnification tour, basically, except he wasn't on the album. He's just on the tour. But anyway, there's a great DVD, live DVD of them playing with an orchestra, the Yes Symphonic, and it's fantastic. It's one of the best live documents of the band there is. It'd be great if they pro shot all their 70s tours and we had them all to watch, but they hardly filmed anything back then. So it's nice to see them tackle a lot of music from that era with modern recording, and that's still one of my very favorites. Anyhow, Tom dropped by, and one thing I remember from the DVD is they played Owner of a Lonely Heart, and he played the solo on the keyboard, which I thought was kind of interesting since it's a guitar solo. So here's the story behind how that happened. And at the end, we also ask a question about him doing an homage to Steve Walsh. And you'll see what he has to say about that.
I remember you even did the solo to Owner of a Lonely Heart. How did that come about? Was Steve just like, "I don't want you to play that, you do it"?
Funny story. That was actually my idea in a strange sort of spur of the moment thing, because I think most Yes fans know that Steve Howe would prefer to play Steve Howe Yes music.
Sure.
but here we were playing in parts of Europe that the band had never played before. And so the audiences, the promoters, the DVD producers, they were like, well, you are going to play your number one song, right? And we didn't do Owner of Lonely Heart on the symphonic tour in North America. It wasn't part of it, but there was quite the demand for it once we got to Europe. And Steve wasn't into it, but Chris Squire actually suggested that I talk to him about this because he saw that we got along really well. And I was like, okay, you're just sending this pawn in to get knocked off the chessboard immediately, right? But I had a little meeting with Steve, and he said, you know, I just don't think people would really care for the way I would play that song. And I said, well, what if I played Trevor's harmonized guitar solo on synth? And I don't even know where that idea came from. It was sort of a quick on my feet sort of thing. And he thought about it for a few seconds, said, okay, we'll do it. You take that solo. And so I marched out of the room triumphant to Chris and John, and they looked at me like, how'd you pull that off?
I'm wondering if you might are inspired to go on stage in a pair of shorts that are too small and no shirt and do a handstand anytime soon in honor of Steve Walsh.
If I had a nickel for every time I've done that. Don't hold your breath, America.
That's right.
How are you guys doing? Take a little break here in the middle of it for a second.
Yeah.
So is that watchable or is it a little shaky?
It's
okay.
Yeah, it's working out pretty good.
Good. Okay. Yeah.
I'm impressed you're that steady with the phone.
Yeah. Even after drinking 3 of those. Okay, cool. So, all right. Well, I've got a few more here. Let's see what else we got. I have a story about Gentle Giant getting psychedelics from George Jefferson coming up. And what's kind of nice is to be able to just hear a few stories on their own. Do you think it's kind of cool just to chop out a story and kind of leave it be?
I do, definitely.
Like maybe I could do a side series where I do little bits, tidbits or whatever.
You could do this best of thing that you're doing right now as a standalone video where it's just the clips, too, in addition.
Yeah.
I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a matter of going through there and digging them out. But, once you do, it's like, well, that's a great story. So let's see what else we got here. And did you hear about the Zappa Hologram tour that happened last year? Yeah. We're going to talk about that.
The hologram thing, there was a lot of brouhaha about that when it happened. And it seemed like the fans were kind of evenly divided between, I don't give a damn, let's do it, and oh, what a gimmick, And I was like, I don't care about the hologram. I mean, that seems fun, but I could take it or leave it. You could just stick a picture of Frank on an easel in the middle of the stage, and I'd be as happy. So, what was it like? How did you feel about it?
Well, it was powerful and it was emotional, and I think Frank would have dug it. And the visual aspect, I found that in some ways was unfortunate that the word hologram was attached to it, because the actual visual presentation of the evening went way beyond that. There were all kinds of visual things happening on the screen, and it was people that I trust came to see the show and said that they were completely blown away by it. Dave Gregory from XTC said it was unbelievable. Stephen Wilson said it was unbelievable. And the people who were upset about it without even laying eyes on the thing, well, some of that was just this sort of tribal argumentativeness that happened from people who felt that they needed to align themselves with one member of the Zappa family at the expense of another member of the Zappa family. It's just that the hashtag team mindset, and I just think that is really foolish. And it would have been great for people to just be open to the possibility of an experience that was really moving, I thought. And the band was incredible. So I'm excited about whenever we're able to play again. And hopefully this time next year we'll be able to go out and do shows and do the thing opening for Crimson. And that's going to be an amazing night of music, I think.
Yeah, I hope that Zappa Band Meets King Crimson tour does happen. You know, I hear they moved everything up a year date-wise, so maybe that'll be something to look forward to next year. Although I don't recall them having any dates in Atlanta, so I don't know. It may be a road trip time or something. All right, next up, can you guys guess who this gentleman is? Well, I'll tell you. He is a guitarist from the last version of Paul McCartney's Wings. His name is Lawrence Juber, and he played on an album called Back to the Egg. And around that time, Paul McCartney put together kind of a super group with guys from Led Zeppelin and David Gilmour and others, and they called it the Rockestra. Instead of an orchestra, it was the Rockestra. They all got together and played at Abbey Road. And me and my friend Fernando Perdomo had a chat with Lawrence back in May, which I think is a really interesting chat that gets overlooked a lot. So look it up. You know, just hearing him talk about working with Paul McCartney at length is really interesting, even if you're not familiar with that particular album, although I think it's an excellent Wings album, and I suggest it, Back to the Egg. Anyhow, here's Lawrence talking about the Rockestra.
How did that all come about? And was the song written in advance, knowing that all these stars would come play it later?
Paul had written this tune that he thought would be fun to do a rock orchestra. And he said, let's do it. And so they made the calls, and they got, you know, John Bonham and Kenny Jones. It would have been Keith Moon, but he died, you know, a month earlier. And Dave Gilmour and Pete Townsend and Hank Marvin and John Paul Jones. And I mean, it was a long list.
And this was in Studio 2 or 1?
2.
2, wow. Wow, it must have been a packed room. How loud was it?
It was pretty packed. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty exciting. But, you know, you can't be that loud if you were, well, I mean, I say John Bonham was in there. I mean, you know, it sounded like somebody was driving. He sat down at the drums, and it sounded like somebody drove a truck through the studio.
Amazing.
A lot of noise. But the fact is that, I mean, it was, you know, of course you're wearing headphones too, so I really not quite sure how loud it truly was in the room. But, you know, when you've got that many musicians playing, you want a certain amount of lead just to get the blend, but you don't want so much that you can't control a proper balance.
How much did you geek out being in the same guitar line with all these legends?
Oh, totally. Especially Hank Marvin, who's standing next to me. And, you know, he was my
amazing
personal hero. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the guy. I mean, it's incredible how much Hank Marvin inspired so many guitar players in England, and yet people in America don't know who he is. It's amazing. It's an incredible thing.
Well, because Cliff Richard never had the career in the States that he had everywhere else.
All right. So that's great. Yeah, I always enjoyed the Rockestra theme. That's a pretty cool kind of side project that became a Wings song, basically. All right. So I had mentioned Sherman Hemsley of the Jeffersons. George Jefferson himself was a big prog fan, and he actually played some prog on his show from time to time on the Jeffersons. Like there's a scene where he comes dancing in the room with a boombox on his shoulder, and it's blasting a tune from Nectar, who was on my show a few months ago. And it turns out to show his gratitude, when he had a chance to meet these bands, he had often offered them come bearing gifts, I should say. So check this out.
Back in the 70s and 80s, there was a TV show called The Jeffersons, and the lead actor was
That's my friend Brad
Hemsley, who
Oldham.
was a huge progressive rock band.
Yep.
There's been a story going around for years that he appeared on the Dinah Shore show and danced to the song Proclamation.
Correct.
And then when he sat down to talk with Dinah, she asked about it, and he extolled the virtues of Gentle Giant for several minutes. Do you have any knowledge of that? Is that actually true?
Yes, it's true. And let me give you another story about Sherman Hemsley. When we were playing L.A., I didn't know who Sherman Helmsley was. The band didn't know who he was. You know, we were from the UK. And the label manager for Columbia said, there's a guy called Sherman Helmsley who wants to say hi to you. And he's a very big star on TV. I said, okay, whatever. So he came backstage and he said, hey man, I'm a real fan of your band. And I said, great. Thank you for coming, you know. And he said, and I got something special for you. And he said, I said, what is it? And he said, well, it was a metal tray. And he said, I got something to imbibe. And I said, what's that? And it was mushrooms.
Right.
And we're not talking about, you know, button mushrooms that you have with your pizza, exactly that. And Sherman Helmsley came backstage. I've got something special for you. and you know, I said, well, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. So he came backstage and said, I love you. I love your band, and you're great, et cetera, and here's your special gift, which I didn't imbibe in, but I believe that one or two of the band did, but not me. And that's it. So yes, I'm familiar with both of those stories.
That's right. So I come bearing gifts. You may not want them, but here they are.
Well, I think one or two members did, but I no.
Yeah, so now you know. And funny thing, I chat with Nectar, and they told me almost the exact same story. So check out that interview that's on our page at YouTube. And next up, here's a story. You know, if you're familiar with Yes from the 90s onward, this guy had been on the periphery, and it was almost a given that he would wind up in Yes sooner or later. He was became really good friends with Chris Squire. You know, this is Billy Sherwood, who's played bass with Yes for the past 5 years since Chris passed away. And Chris was the one that asked him to do it. You know, at the time, I think he thought he was just going to fill in, but then things didn't go so well, and he became the heir apparent. And I think he's done a great job. You know, he loves this music and intimately knows it and has been playing it since he was a teenager. So, you know, who better? And we had a chance to chat with Billy back on the 4th of July. He just moved into a new house and was in the middle of unpacking, and took time out to chat with us for a couple hours. And we talked about all those 90s Yes albums that he was part of, and the future of Yes, and all kinds of cool stuff. So you should definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. And, you know, he's part of the new group, The Arc of Life, the Yes offshoot, and they will be my guests. Turns out it's going to be in February. I thought it was going to be January, but they want to make sure the record's out before they come talk about it, which makes sense. And I definitely want to hear it too. So February for sure, The Arc of Life will spark on the show for us. So anyhow, here's the story of how Billy met Chris Squire.
Did you first meet Chris and kind of work your way into the Yes equation that way, or how? Where's this?
I saw Chris at a Moody Blues concert. He was sitting a few rows in front of me and over to the right, and I was there watching my friend Guy Allison, who was in World Trade, who was the second keyboard player in the Moody's. And in the Moody's at that time was Patrick Moraz from Yes, obviously. And so I came to see Guy, but I was also going to meet Patrick for the first time. I was kind of excited to meet the guy from Relayer. And then I see Chris sitting there in front of me, and he got up to go back to the green room with his laminate, you know, and I just hopped up and followed him and got behind him and literally grabbed his coat and pulled on it and said, "Hey, you're Chris Squire." And he turned around and he said, "Yeah, I am. What about it?" You know, and I, you know, told him what a huge fan I was, and that was our actual first encounter. And then we were backstage together because I had my own laminate through Guy, and I didn't want to bug him or anything like that. But we had a mutual friend and an engineer named Tom Fletcher, who's a friend of mine who's worked with me on a bunch of records in the past, and Yes too. And Tom was in Chris's ear all night going, you need to meet this guy. You know, so when I walked over to say hello again the second time, Chris was kind of like, "This guy tells me we should hang out. We should do stuff together." And then it just kind of started from there. You want to go to dinner? You want to write a song? And we just became fast friends immediately.
Cool story.
It sounds like a date, kind of, you know. We started hanging out and we went to dinner and
it's a musical
wrote
date.
songs.
Yeah. And the next, you know, and that was, the first time they played live was with a group called the Chris Squire Experiment, which only did about 5 dates. They did a few in California, and then they did one in Phoenix, Arizona, which I just happened to be at. And that was 1992. And they played at a little dive bar, rock metal bar called the Mason Jar. And Alan White was playing drums. Billy was there. Chris was there. And they had Steve Porcaro on keyboards, who, his brother's Jeff Porcaro, who had ironically died that very week. Remember, he was spraying some pesticide in his yard and he had some sort of reaction and it killed him. And I think, and Billy talked about that. He said that, he, it was like, if you're not up for this, and he's like, no, I think music's probably the best thing for me at this point. So they went ahead and played the show, and it was great. And it was basically like seeing Open Your Eyes era, Yes, 5 years early, because they played that song. It was called Wish I Knew at the time. And they played a bunch of other stuff that didn't make the record, because what happened was the record company heard those songs and they said, we really like this song, Wish I Knew. So they went and wrote a bunch of new songs to go with it, and that became the Open Your Eyes record. And they changed the name of Wish I Knew to Open Your Eyes. So anyhow, that was kind of a glimpse at it and how he met Chris and all that. Because you always wonder, they're really great friends. Well, just how did they meet? And next up, I had the pleasure of chatting on the phone with Trevor Rabin about a lost epic from the 80s. And you think of 80s, yes, you don't think about long tunes, they were much shorter. And I was wondering if maybe they were just out of style. And there's an epic one. There's a tune on the side 2 of 90125 called Cinema, which is an instrumental. And it turned out that supposedly it was the beginning of a 20-minute epic called Time. So I asked Trevor about this lost epic, and his answer was actually different than what other people have heard him say. So it's still kind of blurry about exactly what Time was, but we get a little talk about it, and also just about how they felt about epics at the time. It's like there could have easily been some 80s epics. They weren't against the idea. And thanks for dropping by. Hey, Lauren, it's good to see you. Happy holidays. As you can see, I'm kind of doing this quick and on the cheap, but I hope it's enjoyable here.
Back in the 90125 days, and there's this fabled 20-minute tune called Time that Cinema, I believe, was the beginning couple minutes of it. Can you tell us a bit about that? I feel like I've heard you discuss this, but it's been so long I don't remember what you said. And I guess what I'm curious about is, was the other 20 minutes as arranged as those 2 minutes that wound up on the record? And what was the rest of the song like musically?
Well, if on 90124, there's a demo of it. I don't think it's called Time. I think I called it something else on there. God, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a very long piece. It starts with the cinema part. It was something like, well, actually, the beginning of it is cinema, but on the song which I did on the demo I put on 90124, it starts actually with the beginning of the live version of Own a Bloody Heart.
So that whole 20 minutes is on 90124.
Except for the beginning, which is cinema.
Okay, and cinema was just the very top of the song, the first couple minutes, and then after that?
Yeah, that's how it started.
Okay, and how would you describe the rest of the tune, musically? Does it go through some changes? No pun intended.
Yeah, no, it goes through many changes, a lot of, I think, tempo changes, time signatures, sorry.
Yeah.
Losing myself there. Yeah, a number of time signature things, and it was pretty interesting. And obviously, eventually there are rehearsal tapes somewhere which I wish I could get. I just haven't found them, but there's tapes of me, Tony, Chris, and Alan playing it. And I haven't heard it for so long, but it's basically based on the 90124 version, which starts with the beginning of Own a Bloody Heart.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Was there ever any thought of putting a longer version of it on 90125, or did it just feel like epics were kind of passé in the early 80s and best of you?
Well, no. In fact, there was really no intention to only do short songs. It's just what turned out. At rehearsal, there was, a number of really long songs, and we just didn't. A lot of those just didn't stand up against some of the songs we thought worked, which were a bit shorter. But we easily could have done a double album with 90125.
Imagine that. That would have been great. I'm amazed there isn't some sort of box set that unearthed all this extra stuff. Maybe one day it'll happen. All right. Next up, John Lodge from the Moody Blues. We had a chat about his new song that he recorded in lockdown called, I believe it's called These Strange Times, which seems very appropriate. And I asked him about Mellotron mishaps, because, the Moody's were known for using the Mellotron to sound like an orchestra. And he had a funny recollection of one.
I was wondering, do you ever remember a time when a Mellotron malfunctioned right in the middle of a live performance? Any funny, any quick 2-minute story? Fillmore East.
Fillmore East in New York. We played 2 songs, and suddenly we heard the manager go, "There's a strange sound," and the Mellotron is loops of tape,
right?
And the loops of tape were coming out of the Mellotron at the back like spaghetti.
Well, that's pretty
And so we played second fiddle to Roadrunner cartoons. In those days, at the Fillmore East, they used to put cartoons on during the concert, and also you had Joe's Lights, all the magic lights that we used to do with candle wax and everything else. So we were on there. It was our first foray, it was our first real concert in New York, and it all went wrong. But we carried on. We did the concert with the Mellotron and everything else, and our fans gave us the benefit of the doubt, I think, and stuck with us. So thank you for that.
All righty, and how about Rick Wakeman in those capes?
When did you start with the capes, and how did they evolve, and who made them for you?
The capes were made by a lovely lady called Denise Gandrup from Ohio, and they came about when in 1971 there was I had quite a few keyboards. Of course, I had pedals for everything, volume pedals and things, and they were all at different heights. And we had a review, which was great because we were only 4th on the bill most of the time. But we actually had a small review in one paper that said, it was very kind, said Rick Wakeman played really this talented young keyboard player, that kind of that. And said, but he looked like a demented spider with legs going in the air to try and reach pedals and arms stretching back behind him and things. And I really, and the next show we did, I became very aware that, yeah, I must look like a demented spider from out the front, but there's nothing I could do about it. And then we played a small festival in Hartford, Connecticut, and it was being introduced by one of the local DJs at the local radio station. And he was on stage, and we were waiting to go on. We've only got a half an hour spot, and he was at the front wearing a cape, a 3/4 length cape, with a big black with a big star on the back. And I didn't think much of a big sorry moon. I didn't think much about it. And then he introduced us, turned around, and he was quite a big fella. And I remember thinking, wow, that cape covers a multitude of sins. And then I thought, if it covers that, that could be my answer. And he came off stage, and we were earning $200 a week then. And I'd just been paid, and I had the $200, 10 $20 bills in my back pocket. And as he came on, I said, I want to buy your cape. And he said, it's not for sale. And I took the money out of the flat. I said, this is all I've got. It's $200. It's my wages. And he looked at the money and went, it's yours. So I gave him the money. He gave me the cape, which he was much smaller than me, so it was only like a half-length cape. But I went on wearing it. We did the show. Came off, and Michael Tate, who I mentioned earlier, wonderful Tate Towers, came to me and he said, that's the answer. But it's not a small half-black cape. You need a full cape, and it needs to be one with secrets of things that will pick up the lights. And then it will work. It needs to be heavy, and that will cover all of your movements. That's what you need. And I said, well, where am I going to find something like that? And he said, I know a girl in Ohio, in Cleveland, who will make it for you. I said, brilliant. So he got her to come along to a show, and she made my capes for, oh, crikey, 5 years.
Okay. And then, like, around going for the one, you went for kind of almost an Evel Knievel kind of look. Was that an inspiration at all? The big stars. It wasn't. You weren't even wearing a cape. It looked more like, you know.
It was. I don't know why. I don't know why I did that. To be brutally honest with you, what I was wearing during those period of time was akin to a bad dream, really. I was very glad to get back to capes again because it's interesting. I only feel comfortable on stage doing any form of rock show or prog show if I'm wearing a cape. It doesn't feel right otherwise.
And Jon Anderson in that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
You know, a lot of us really enjoyed watching the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony. I was wondering if you had any memories you could share from that night with us.
Well, I got on stage and I hyperventilated.
Well, I couldn't tell.
No, I was very happy that Rick started telling jokes. That really perfect timing. And basically the band rehearsed in the afternoon with the bass player. I forgot your name.
Oh, Geddy Lee. Yeah, Mr. Rush.
I think of him as Eddie. It's Geddy.
Geddy, yeah.
And yeah, Geddy was brilliant, and the band played great. And that was the main thing of being there, because you're with 10,000 people, and you know it's being filmed, and you're sort of feeling like, I hope I can sing okay. And then as soon as you get on stage and we start going through the intro for Going Up the Lonely Heart, a roundabout, I was locked in, on stage, performing. I felt great.
Well, it was a wonderful moment, and I'm so glad that y'all had a chance to get together. I'm sorry the hall didn't get you in there before Chris passed away, because I think he really would have enjoyed it. But, you know, better late than never.
Yeah, I agree. But Chris was with us all the time. Still is.
Good point, yeah, absolutely.
All right. You still awake, Steven?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah,
Yeah, good. That's a good segue to the next thing, isn't it? That was awesome with it's just awesome all the people you got to talk to, you know? Like I'm still excited for you that you got to do all those interviews and I got to be a part of some of them, you know?
Thank you, brother. Well, you're welcome to do more.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a real treat, you know, and everybody I've spoken to is somebody whose music has made my life better one way or another, you know.
Right.
You know, and it just makes it a lot more special.